I know what you're thinking. Hang on. At the end of the last Rumination, you're probably raising your eyebrow at me, saying, why did he think of this episode as so terrible? I mean, there's nothing really particularly terrible about Renaissance Man. And you'd be right, this is actually one of my favorite episodes of Voyager. Really. I mean that sincerely. And another reason why I tend to like Season 7 overall. However, there are two massive problems with it. But before I go into that, I want to just address something. This is going to sound like damning with faint praise, but I tend to notice when Voyager does a smart episode, aka doesn't treat the audience like they're stupid, and the characters act both in character and intelligently react to circumstances. I know that, and again, that probably should be the norm. That probably should be the thing that happens all of the time. And let's be honest, very few shows actually do that, even amongst the greats. I mean, TNG actually has this same problem where occasionally characters will just act stupidly, and the episode will treat the audience like they're stupid. So I always tend to notice when an episode is smart. That's what I call it. That's the terminology. It's a smart episode. And this is one of those. Now, it's a smart episode. It's a good character piece. It establishes increasing dynamic between the Doctor and Janeway. It treats the Doctor kind of like he should be treated. In fact, there's this great bit right at the beginning where he basically says he's happy to be a hologram, but he's not a hologram supremacist. He's just thankful to be who he is, and thankful to have friends who aren't. Which is kind of the Star Trek message, isn't it? We may be different, but we could still be pals, right? And I like that. He's basically completed his character arc. Woo! In Endgame, he'll even marry an organic. And, it's okay, that never happened. But yeah, so they've got all this wonderful character development for him. They've got the beginnings of what could have been, at the very least, a closer friendship, if not an actual relationship between him and Seven. You know, they've got the return of the hierarchy and good usage of it. There's actually a scene where the guy goes, plunk! Oh, I guess it wasn't useless after all. Would your engineer still be interested in buying all my junk? And I was just like, yes! That's awesome! I love that scene. It was a great comeuppance scene. It was classic comeuppance, but it was still a great presented one. I loved the guy who played the second hierarchy guy. So, overall, good stuff, right? So, why is this bad? Well, two reasons, and they're both kind of the same reason, really. This is the second to last episode of the entire series. It's the second to last episode of Voyager. And now we're seeing all this stuff happen? This episode could have happened at any point in Season 6 or 7 and slotted in just fine. And not had any impact on anything. Which is in two separate ways is the problem. First of all, it's the problem because Homestead ended on a way that clearly and naturally led up to a finale for the series. Neelix permanently leaving the crew. He's been with us literally since the first episode, and he's bowing out. In retrospect, I actually do question that more and more the more I think about it, but at least they did a good send-off, and it felt, you know, emotional and impactful, and it demonstrated the connection between him and the rest of the crew. That was good, or at least half good. Lead us into the finale, or have this be something related to the finale. This episode has nothing to do with anything. This episode could just fit wherever. So that's the first problem. It gets in the way of the flow of the finale. Now, to explain what I'm using here, let me explain my terminology a little bit. I refer to the finale as the lead up to and including the climax. Then there's the climax, which is the end point of a work. You know, the last boss of a video game, the final, the bulk of a final episode of a series, you know, or the final few minutes of a movie, and then there's the actual ending, which is after all that, and sometimes there's an epilogue, which is after all that. So this is the structure, right? So the finale includes the build-up and lead-up to that ending, and Homestead felt like a part of the finale. So it's like, we're building up to an ending. Oh, hang on, let's do a random episode. Okay, now have the ending. Anyways. So, that's the first problem. The second problem is, it goes back to real life. Not RL. I mean, there's an episode called Real Life, which really pissed me off at the time. But one of the biggest reasons it pissed me off, really, was that it had no continuity. If you're going to do something that powerful and impacting and emotionally damaging to a character, have it matter. This episode is like groundwork for character development. This, if you would put this at the beginning of season 7 and really kind of have it move forward as the family, because family has always been the theme of season 7. I don't know if they did it on purpose. In fact, actually, I've done a little additional research since I've originally said that sentence. I am actually 100% certain they did not do it on purpose. Here's my theory as to what happened, though. I think the reason season 7's theme is of family is because these people have finally settled into their niche together. The actors, the cameramen, the lighting crew, the writers, the directors, the music scores, all of the people involved in making Voyager, all of the crew of the Voyager show have become family over the last 7 years. And there was a lot of natural chemistry that I've talked about many times on this show, and it's one of the reasons why I still like this show, despite its many flaws, is because there was a lot of real oomph, and a lot of really good chemistry, and a lot of really good attempts. And you could just feel that they had basically become a temporary family. And that does tend to happen on a show regardless. It's not like Voyager's unique in this. But I think that's pretty much the reason season 7 was the family season. Because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the season, they were all like, we have no requirements upon us anymore. Rick Berman had finally taken a step back. I'll talk about that more next week, by the way. But Rick Berman had finally taken a step back and said, do whatever. You can end the show on your terms and you can do whatever you want. And they just kind of embraced it. And so this episode, if you had slotted it at the beginning of season 7, make this one of the first season 7 episodes and lead into this overall theme of everyone being close. This is a great launch-off point for so many things. In fact, there's an episode, Human Error, which could have tied in nicely if this had happened before that. Imagine that she had been going through all those motions with Chakotay. Leave it basically as is. But in the end, rather than slamming that reset button, have her admit that one of the reasons she started doing this was because the doctor admitted he had feelings for her. That his romantic concept had basically introduced the idea to her. That it's not like she doesn't know what romance is, but at no point in time had it occurred to her to actually pursue it until he mentioned he had feelings for her. And the doctor, proving that he's a good friend before any romantic interest comes in, says, I'll try to help you through with these anxiety issues you have, with trying to help you with your social interactions, and we will do this. Because remember, Human Error ended with the doctor saying, this is a great first step, and with time and effort we can work on this. Have him reach out to her. Have there be a natural friendship develop there, which may or may not develop into a relationship. That doesn't even matter at that point. You know, and there's other things too. There's several ways that season 7 could have been improved with the inclusion of the Doctor and his presentation in this episode. If you just slot it before and had the continuity matter. And really, okay, I got to tell you guys a story really quick. It's okay if you want to fast forward like a couple minutes. I don't mind. So this is the 5th time I have sat down to record this rumination. Something keeps getting in the way. The dog needs to be let out, or I realized I was having the wrong outfit, or I didn't have the right green screen effect going on, or my lighting was weird, or the freaking street sweeper was going by. Can you hear it? So now they're going by again. I'm never going to record this episode, guys. It's never going to happen. Go on, just go by. Come on, it's okay. But aside from those two, which are effectively the same flaw, I really do like this episode. Like I said, it's a smart episode. I don't have a lot to talk about it, but I finally have a possible answer for why they brought Carrie back. I know this is going to sound weird, but I noticed that they brought back 2 characters from Season 1 of Voyager in this episode. Extra Man, I don't remember his name, don't ask me to, but, you know, Extra Man, the Maquis guy, and Vorik, who hasn't been seen in forever, Jerry Taylor's son. And it was just like... And I think they're just bringing them in to help close out the series. Because, again, they were basically given a blank check. Do whatever. And you know what? I actually like that. If I had been involved, I would have loved it if they could have brought several more characters back from the old days. Just guest stars. Give them a line or two. if I had been involved in Voyager season 1 or season 2 or season 3 or whatever as just like an extra guest star, ensign or whatever, and they, my agent called me, he's like, hey, they want you to come back for like 2 lines on one of the last episodes. I would have been like, yeah, why not? Probably doesn't pay well, and it's not going to do a lot for my career, but who cares? It's an easy shoot to do one scene, right? And you can have that closeout kind of a thing. Like, you remember the 3 guest stars from Good Shepherd is the name of the episode. It would have been cool if they had come back for that kind of thing. But anyways, I digress. Moving on. The street sweeper has moved on. So I don't actually remember. I'm sorry if I've talked about this, because, again, this is the 5th time I've sat down to talk about this, but I do like the fact that the Doctor flat out admits that he's happy to be a hologram. He's not a hologram supremacist, like he's been sometimes written, but he's happy to be a hologram, but he's also happy to be around organics. And it's a nice thing. It's a conclusion of his story arc, and it's a nice way to segue into another story arc, which is basically him becoming more actually friends with the rest of the crew, more actually family with the rest of the crew, rather than simply being a part of the crew. And Lord knows he has strong connections to some characters, but this, again, could have been a nice segue into more of that, like him and Janeway, for example, or him and Seven, So, early on, Dr. Janeway, is obviously acting off. And by obviously, I mean it's not obvious. And that's actually, again, it's going back to that smart thing. She is acting off. There is no denying or ignoring that. But, well, I'm trying to think of the name of the episode. I think it's Too Human? No, that's the wrong episode. In the Flesh, maybe? There's an episode where the Doctor had to basically put himself in 7 of 9. And so, in lore, what was happening was the Doctor was walking around in Seven's body. Now, in out of character, what that meant was Jerry Ryan, am I saying her name right? Jerry Ryan and Jerry Taylor, I keep getting confused. But anyways, the actress who plays Seven was basically playing the Doctor. And it was a little caricature-y. She did a good job of it, don't mistake me. But it was, I mentioned back at the time, you could kind of tell really obviously that she was playing the Doctor. And I like that in this episode, Kate Mulgrew is playing the Doctor, playing Janeway, and being the talented actress she is, she actually does a pretty good job of that. She still comes across as Janeway, and yet, if you close your eyes and listen to the lines, you can actually hear the Doctor's word structure, the Doctor's tone, the Doctor's tempo. That's an important one. I don't talk about tempo of speech all that often, but the Doctor has a very kind of a tempo to how he speaks. And actually I'm that's even exaggerating. It's more of a it's actually quite musical, which is appropriate. And so his tempo, she manages to pull off while still managing to sound at least a little bit like Janeway. It's a good touch, and every time he plays someone else, they all do a fairly good job of it. Roxanne Dawson does a good job of it. Robert Beltran does a good job of it. Good stuff all around. So, big plus there. Also, several times in this episode, they notice that things are going odd pretty much instantly. One of my favorite bits is Dr. Janeway comes down and is like, so, if I could tow the warp core, blah, 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 blah. And then she leaves, and the moment she leaves, Torres says, Torres to Chakotay. And later on, Tuvok comes down. Now, this is actually another part. I'm skipping ahead of my notes a little bit, but I love this scene because not only is it very well done, but it's very smart. This is actually towards the end of the episode. But Tuvok comes down to confront the Doctor. Now, this is very smart for 3 reasons. First, because it showcases that Tuvok has been doing his own independent investigation in the background. Which makes perfect sense. Tuvok knows Janeway like nobody else. He's known her for years and years and years. Probably before she was born, technically. I mean, you get my point. He's known her for a long time. So, he would pick up on this, start his own investigation, put the pieces together, has done so, and then, having done so, all off camera, they don't need to show us that, he approaches and confronts the Doctor. Then, second reason it's smart, the moment the Doctor says, okay, I'll go along with this, and attempts to attack him, Tuvok's ready for it, and then actually has a counterattack for him, attacking the holographic emitters in the sickbay. And the third reason it's smart is it begins the chase sequence, which is actually, in my opinion, one of the better Star Trek chase sequences ever. And I mean that sincerely. But I'll get more to that later. There's another, speaking of smart, there's a lot of good blocking. I know that's a weird thing to comment on, but I noticed it, which is why I wanted to bring it up. So, they keep good track of where the actors are. I don't mean, I'm using the wrong terminology. I'm using a programming term. They keep a good track of where all the objects are with regards to the characters. So, Dr. Janeway leaves, goes down to sickbay. Chakotay goes to her quarters. Chakotay goes down to sickbay. Chakotay says, Doc, I need to talk to you. The Doctor's in Janeway's quarters as Janeway. Needs to quickly switch back to Doctor mode, and then beams to sickbay immediately. And when asked, he's like, well, you did say immediately. Then Chakotay goes from sickbay to Janeway's quarters. So the Doctor then goes from sickbay to Janeway's quarters, and Janeway comes down the corridor right behind Chakotay. So they showcase this logically, as if it was, it adds a great deal of believability, the blocking of it. It's one of the reasons why good blocking is a good thing in any work, really, where there's a visual medium involved. So, then there's the villain of the week, also very the Doctor, by the way. But what's funny is, and I don't think they did this on purpose, but they give away very obviously that that's not what's happening. Because there's no villainous music playing. Now, forgive me for pointing this out, because this is going to sound like damning with faint praise, but every time, I've talked before about the music problem with Voyager. I think I had a whole rant about it back in Basics, all the way back in Season 2, Season 3. But Season 2, Season 3, I'm right. But the whole problem is Voyager basically uses textbook music. So I've made it a point to point out when they do music properly, because otherwise it's just them doing textbook music. Now, to be clear, this is not them doing music properly. This is just them continuing the textbook. So whenever there's a bad guy with a big ship on the screen, there's a specific kind of horns, trumpet, and a little bit of baritone thing going on in the background, dun, 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 to emphasize that danger is happening, the generic danger music, right? There's none of that playing on the screen while the guy is threatening them on the screen with the big ship. And I was just like, wow, they're actually giving that away. That's funny. Because obviously he's not. He's just the Doctor pretending. And then, of course, Janeway is finally caught by Chakotay in a way that makes sense, I might add. Chakotay basically makes up this story about her past, and she runs with it because the Doc is improvising. And then he says, yeah, no, that never happened. So then he's like, I'm sorry. And then he reaches for a hypo spray. On the off chance you haven't put it together yet, that's pretty much the moment. Because he reaches for a Doc Janeway reaches for a hypo spray, not a phaser. And hypo sprays him down. Because after all, a hypo spray will do less damage than a phaser, and will hurt less than a phaser, and is the tool of a medical person rather than a freaking gun. It's also fairly consistent. The Doctor has repeatedly done that, even in his fantasies. You remember the episode Tenor Dr. Teeker's Spy? There's a scene where he activates the emergency command hologram, and then he starts dual-wielding hyposprays. Like, that's so perfectly him. It's like, okay, I am now capable of dealing with all opponents. So rather than just having one hypospray, I have two! It's perfect. I love it. So, and then, of course, she manages to literally overpower him. Good acting on that, by the way. It's hard to get across the feeling that you're being physically overwhelmed by someone who is much physically weaker than you. No offense to Kate Mulgrew, but I don't think she's stronger than Robert Beltran. And then, of course, the emitter. The way he's been hiding the emitter is actually brilliant. Just right pull the pant leg up. There we go. Pull the pant leg down. Right there on the ankle. Very nice. Very smart. There's even a great scene, and I love that they did this, because they didn't have to, where Taurus is like, Doc Taurus is leaving, and then looks down and is like, and there's just this moment of, computer, update physical parameters, and then it adds the fact that Taurus is pregnant. Now, what's funny is they couldn't have even done that scene if not for the fact that Roxanne Dawson was actually not pregnant at this point in time. Now, so first of all, they were allowed to do that scene because of the nature of reality of the actress, but the other reason I find that funny is because Roxanne Dawson has not been pregnant and pretended to be pregnant, and then been pregnant and pretended not to be pregnant throughout the course of several years, actually, of this show. It's like, no matter what she does, she can't away from being pregnant, either fake or real. Anyways. So then we finally really start to see our villains, our actual villains, the hierarchy. At first, they seem very typical good cop, bad cop, but then it becomes much more clear that what we've got is actually an alpha male, beta male kind of a situation. The alpha male has been like, oh, I've protected you, and I'm willing to do whatever's necessary. He's basically an actual pirate. The beta guy is more typical hierarchy. Okay, I will help with doing this. And do you think your engineer would be interested in buying all my... I love that scene. I don't remember if I've talked about that already, but there's this great scene where, towards the end, textbook come up in scene where he's like, plonk, oh, I guess that wasn't so useless after all. Would your engineer still be interested in buying all my... Yes! So I made a note here. By this point, you think people will get suspicious, like Vorik or Tom. And by the way, poor the Doctor having to literally kiss Tom. Oh my god. And yet, again, as I pointed out, the episode is smart about it. Clearly, the crew have been putting the pieces together, just our camera has been following the Doctor. So we actually haven't been seeing them put the pieces together. And then, of course, it culminates in that perfect scene where the Tuvok confronts him intelligently for the two reasons I mentioned, and then starts the best chase sequence. First of all, huge props to the FX department for actually daring to pull off something that, honestly, I think looks great even now, and is something that should be available. I'm going to diverge for a moment, forgive me. How many of you have seen Star Wars Rogue One? I'm going to kind of spoil a scene. Don't worry, it's not story-related at all, but I am going to talk about a scene in that, okay? One of the things that has always bothered me about the Star Wars movies is that we're never shown the actual power level of the characters involved. Ever. Right? We have to rely on the TV show, the books, and the games to see what these characters are actually capable of. Because they never have really had the ability to showcase that properly on screen, or they've never tried. Grievous in Episode 3 is this pathetic guy who just has a whirlwind lightsaber. Grievous in the books, Grievous in the show, is a death machine. One of the best saber duelists, arguably, of all time in Star Wars. And that's without the Force, for God's sakes. My point is, in Rogue One, it's the first time ever in Star Wars we have seen on the big screen someone be as strong as they are in lore. Vader walks down a corridor and absolutely destroys everyone. He does it he doesn't even do it casually. He enjoys it. He plays with them and just hits them with the Force and the blade. If you haven't seen the scene, you owe it to yourself to at least YouTube, Darth Vader corridor scene. It's awesome. But I bring that up because it's one of those things that we, the audience, always have to kind of keep in the back of our mind. It's the budget question. I'll probably come up with a proper terminology and add it to my loriums, because this will come up a lot in TNG with regards to Data, or Odo in DS9. But it's the budget question. We know these characters are capable of X, Y, and Z, but they don't showcase that because that's expensive to showcase on screen. So they normally don't. It is therefore more enjoyable, at least to me and some of my friends, when they actually do finally stretch and show what they can really do on screen. Like Vader storming down that corridor, or like the escape sequence with the Doctor. And so many... Honestly, most of this episode showcases what the Doctor's really capable of and does a great job of it. But my favorite part is getting back to it, the escape scene in Tuvok where he literally jumps through a window. I don't mean break it. His program's destabilizing, so he jumps through while it's destabilizing, and while he's in the desk, picks up the mobile emitter with the part of him that's still cohesive, immediately transfers himself to it, puts it on himself, and runs out the door. And what ensues is is actually him being smart, them figuring this out, him then trying to reconnoiter them figuring it out, him literally running on the ceiling Matrix style because he can do that because he's a hologram. Again, all of this makes sense. He is capable of these things. We've just never seen it because that's expensive. And they do a great job portraying it. I love it. Very smart. So let's skip ahead a little bit. Then the tempo of the episode calms down a little bit. Also, I think one of the things I like about this episode is there's not really a threat of the week. I mean, yeah, there's the hierarchy, but there are more people to be worked with than worked against. And yeah, there's the Doctor, but again, he's just doing this because he feels he has to. This is really an episode about really exploring what the Doctor can do if he really stretches himself. Which is funny because that's what the teaser starts with, him talking about how much he can stretch himself as an individual. But there's this interesting line he gives that I actually find very curious. He says, Voyager can survive without a warp core, but not a captain. Now, I get the Doctor doesn't really think like that. Or he doesn't really think tactically. He doesn't really think in terms of functionality to reality. He thinks in terms of morality, ethics, and, of course, medicine. So I'm with that. But, yeah, it can. I mean, first of all, they've got several people with significant command experience behind. At least two I can think of, Chakotay and Tuvok, who would have no trouble taking command and doing a damn fine job of it. Second of all, without a warp core, they can't go to warp. Now, forgive me for flaunting my science fiction knowledge here, but space is big, okay? Space is big. Like, really big. The amount of time it would take... This actually became a plot point in an Enterprise episode. The amount of time it would take at full impulse, which is almost warp 1, a.k.a. light speed, to go from here on Earth to the nearest star is in the years range. Years. Think about that. So, yeah, no, taking the warp core was kind of damaging, dude. Now, the funny part, though, is once again the episode is actually smart. This is all keeping in character with the Doctor. And as soon as they... And then they turn things back on, and the music starts playing with the obvious off notes. And they figure it out almost immediately. It's like, oh, that must be damaged. No, I think that's deliberate. Yep, that's a warp core thing. Awesome! We've got the warp signature. Sweet. Very intelligent. Great way to leave a trail for the Doctor. Then they're like, well, we can't follow them because we don't have a warp core. Oh yeah, we've got shuttles! And I have to admit, this just shows how much Voyager has frustrated me over the years, because Voyager has had this really bad habit, many, many times, of forgetting they have shuttles. Seriously, for those of you not aware, shuttles are independent things, so they have the ability to have their own environment, which would be useful. They have their own warp drives, which would be useful, and they have their own transporters, which would be useful. There have been well over a dozen episodes across Voyager's run where just remembering they had shuttles would basically solve the dilemma they're going through. It's like, oh yeah. So I like the fact that they're like, oh yeah, we've got shuttles. They hop in a shuttle to go after the ship. Now, what's doubly amusing is this is why I say the hierarchy fleers, because they're not actually with the hierarchy, but those guys are not actually the threat of the week. They've got a big ship, and it's really strong. Okay. So they decide to think their way around the situation intelligently. I love the fact that they go after the Delta Flyer first, doubling up their numbers, and the Delta Flyer is actually a fairly competent ship, so I'm with that on both accounts. But then... remember, this is a big old ship which has two guys on it. They're not exactly battle-hardened and battle-ready. The only reason they're a threat at all is because the guy was going to be a pirate, to also think his way around their assault. Beam out the warp core and then detonate it in order to destroy them. And notice the other guy just freaks out. You want to kill them? Whoa! Whoa! Not acceptable there, buddy! And then there's the great scene, which I've already referenced possibly twice. And then there's the Doc's confession scene, which is brilliant. Again, very in character for the Doctor to go into theatrics, basically. So much of his character development of interacting with others has actually been done on the holodeck and through his own interest in opera. And what happens is basically a scene from an opera. Oh, I've always wanted... And so he thinks in his head, I have to confess all the worst things I've done to these people. He doesn't confess like the best things, which is funny, because we've heard him confess the best things in several cases. His concern and caring for Janeway, his respect for Tom Paris, his admiration for Tuvok and his logic, and so forth and so on. But no, it's operatic. He has to say get all the dirty laundry out. And I love how he says, here, Mobile Emitter, Daystrom Institute, please let the other people feel the freedom I've felt. First thing he does, love that. Then he starts going through the embarrassing stuff, airing out the dirty laundry, so to speak, and then he ends it with his confession to Seven, and he wishes to say goodbye with his final moments. Now, let's be 100% clear. If I thought I was about to die, I would probably be fairly dramatic about it too, because I'm a fairly dramatic person in real life. I've actually had some people accuse me of putting on airs or acting for the show. No, this is what I'm actually like in real life. I am very expressive, I am very demonstrative, and I'm very dramatic. Sorry. So, yeah, I'd probably be like, oh, God, you know, I'm the one who took the quarters from under your bed when I was 6 because I really wanted this one Transformer. That's a real thing that happened, by the way. I feel bad about this to this day. I stole some quarters from my mom to buy a Transformer. I still feel bad about that. I was such a damn stupid kid. Anyways, you know, I'd be like, I totally get that. And then his final confession to Seven, and then the thing that sells the scene, the thing that makes it really click, is he fades away, and Janeway, honestly concerned tone, is he... And then Taurus, completely nonchalant tone, no, I've got him. And he's back. What happened? I fixed you. Yes! I loved that. Just perfect comedic timing. Oh, no, I've got him. Just the nonchalance of it is fantastic. What's funny is I imagine she probably... I can literally picture Taurus being like, I could tell him I got this, but it'll be fine. And then the episode ends with Janeway reaching out to him. Yeah. God, why couldn't you have done more like this, Voyager? Why couldn't you have kept this going? You don't need to have string continuity. You don't have to. I'd prefer it if you did. But if you had had setting continuity, like TNG does, like DS9 does, you could have had this. You could have had this kind of stuff, and Voyager wouldn't have just been good. Voyager would have been awesome! Now, I'm going to let you guys in on a secret, which I'm probably going to say as well in a minute here, or a week by your perspective. I'm doing the Endgame video today, today. So, as soon as I finish cutting this off, I'm going to start doing my research to Endgame, and then I'm going to watch Endgame, and then I'm going to record it. And I'm kind of nervous. I've been doing this for 4.5 years, guys. I don't know what to say about that. I think I'll save more of my speechifying for the next episode, but, I mean... I'm actually lost for words, so I really hope you'll join me next week, guys.